Welcome to the deep dive. We know you're busy, so we get right into it, pulling out the key insights from some really fascinating sources.
Yeah, think of it as your shortcut to being, well, properly informed.
Today we're tackling a giant, Andrew Carnegie, but we're looking at him through a bit of a different lens.
His fears. It sounds counterintuitive, maybe, but we're exploring how his anxieties actually fueled his incredible success story.
We've mapped it across, what, 7 stages of his life?
That's right. 7 key phases where you can really see these fears cropping up and pushing him to act in specific ways. It wasn't just background noise for him.
Okay, let's dive in. Stage 1, back in Dunfermline, Scotland. The sources really paint a picture of his childhood.
They do. You have the Industrial Revolution basically disrupting everything, especially for his father, who was a handloom weaver.
That trade was becoming obsolete, right?
Exactly. And the economic hardship was very real. We see 3 sort of key signs of how this affected young Andrew.
Okay.
First, his mother's constant stress about money, just the day-to-day worry.
You can imagine.
Second, Carnegie himself talked about these dreadful days, his own early understanding of what poverty felt like.
A visceral thing, not just abstract.
Right. And third, maybe the most impactful, was seeing his father after they came to America. He described him as feeling like a broken man because his skills were no longer valued. That failure hit hard.
Wow, that's a heavy burden for a kid. But these fears didn't paralyze him. They actually created some benefits.
Paradoxically, yes. 3 main things emerged from that hardship. 1, he learned intense frugality, almost certainly from his mother, a lifelong habit.
Makes sense, survival skill.
2, it gave him this fierce determination. He had to escape poverty, support his family, no question.
A powerful motivator.
And 3, it sparked this burning ambition, not just for money, but for respectability. He wanted to be the opposite of what he saw happen to his father.
So for you listening, if you're an entrepreneur or have big ambitions, what's the application here?
Well, first, recognize that early struggles, even painful ones, can be incredibly powerful fuel. Don't discount them.
Turn adversity into drive.
Precisely. Second, embrace cost consciousness. Carnegie learned it early.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental strength, not just something you do when times are tough.
Always relevant.
And third, define your why. What's your personal goal? Root it in your own story, your history, like Carnegie did. That gives it power.
Good points. Let's not forget the actual obstacles back then. What was he really up against?
Well, the biggest competitor, in a sense, was the Industrial Revolution itself, just making old skills worthless.
The changing world.
Then there was just pervasive poverty, limited chances in both Scotland and early Pittsburgh. It wasn't easy to get ahead.
And the family situation.
Yeah, the emotional weight of his father's failure. That's a significant challenge for a young man trying to make his way.
So, boiling it down, what are the key lessons from this first stage?
Lesson 1, adversity can be a serious engine for ambition.
Okay.
Lesson 2, practical skills matter. Frugality, hard work, they're foundational.
Still true.
And 3, a support system is crucial. His mother was absolutely key in those early years.
Right. Okay, stage 2. He's in America now, working his way up at the Pennsylvania Railroad, a very different world.
A huge shift. He's working under Thomas A. Scott, a major figure. And his fears start to change too.
How so? Less about basic survival.
Exactly. Now it's more about navigating the business world, climbing the ladder, making connections, dealing with hierarchy. Less about starvation, more about stagnation.
What signs do we see of these new fears?
Well, there's a clear fear of being stuck in low-wage jobs forever. He wanted out of manual labor quickly.
Understandable.
There's also an apprehension towards superiors. You know, that initial nervousness around Scott, especially after he kind of took charge during that train wreck incident. Proving himself was key.
A defining moment for him, wasn't it?
Absolutely. And third, he was very conscious of his lack of formal schooling compared to others. That fueled a drive to learn constantly.
But again, the fears seemed to push him. What benefits came out of this railroad period?
Huge benefits. 1, he gained access to incredible networks, insider information, key contacts, just by being there, being sharp.
Right place, right time, right attitude.
2, he learned fundamental business principles from Scott himself, cost-cutting, efficiency, management, direct mentorship.
Invaluable experience.
And 3, he developed a real knack for smart investments, especially in businesses connected to the railroad. He saw the ecosystem.
So, for you trying to advance your own career, what are the takeaways here?
Find mentors. Actively seek them out. Someone like Scott can accelerate your learning and open doors.
Good advice.
Also, be an information sponge. Really understand your industry from the inside. Know the dynamics.
Don't just do your job. Understand the context.
Exactly. And finally, look for those adjacent opportunities. Where can you invest or grow based on what you already know?
Makes sense. But it wasn't a clear path. What competition or challenges did he face on the railroad?
Oh, plenty. Lots of other ambitious young men wanted those same promotions.
No.
The established system often favored people with connections, with family money, which he didn't have initially.
He was an outsider in some ways.
And yeah, his humble background, the lack of formal education, he constantly had to work harder to prove he belonged.
So the lessons learned during this intense growth phase.
Building social capital networks is critical. It's not just what you know.
It's who you know and who knows you.
Right. Also, leveraging inside knowledge gives you an edge. Information is power.
Definitely.
And finally, taking calculated risks, showing initiative like he did in that train wreck, that's how you move up.
Okay, moving on. Section 3. The Panic of 1873. A major economic crisis.
A huge test. Widespread financial turmoil. This brought a new wave of fear, the fear of total financial ruin.
And this is when he makes the big leap into steel, right? During a panic.
Exactly. A very risky move. Steel was capital intensive, and the economy was tanking. It was a high-stakes gamble driven, in part, by fear.
What signs point to that fear driving this decision?
Well, one telling sign is his refusal to bail out his old mentor, Tom Scott, who was hit hard by the panic. Carnegie protected his own capital first.
Wow, that's quite a turn.
It was ruthless, yeah. Another sign was just the sheer nerve of putting, as he said, all his capital into manufacturing steel right then. That's not caution. That's aggressive action fueled by something deep.
Maybe the fear of not acting.
Perhaps. And later accounts suggest he was haunted by how he treated Scott. Maybe a fear of the moral consequences looking back.
Complex character. But this bold move, it paid off. What were the benefits?
Big time. It forced him to concentrate everything on steel. Laser focus.
All eggs in one basket.
And crucially, it let him expand aggressively while everything was cheap assets, labor. He famously said the best time to expand is when no one else dares to.
Buying low. Classic strategy.
And it reinforced his obsession with cost control. In a capital-heavy business during a downturn, that was survival.
Okay, so for you listening, maybe facing economic uncertainty or a big pivot, what's the application?
Crises create opportunities. It sounds cliche, but Carnegie proved it. If you have the nerve and the resources, you can make strategic moves when others are scared.
Contrarian investing, essentially.
Right. Also, in tough, capital-intensive industries, ruthless cost management isn't just good, it's essential. It's life or death.
Non-negotiable.
And sometimes, yeah, big strategic moves require tough, maybe even personally costly decisions.
What were the specific competitors or challenges during the steel transition?
Well, the panic itself was the biggest challenge. Scarce capital, fear everywhere.
A macro environment.
He was also up against established iron producers. Iron was still dominant. Steel was the newcomer.
Inertia of the old industry.
And always the underlying risk of financial collapse. He bet the farm on steel. If it failed, he was done.
High stakes. And the lessons from this pivot.
That downturns can be launch pads for the bold.
Okay.
That relentless cost control is a superpower in heavy industry.
Got it.
And that sometimes tough, even morally ambiguous decisions are part of driving massive change.
Right. Now, stage 4. Building the actual steel empire. The Edgar Thomson works are up and running.
Yes, now the focus shifts again. His fears become more operational, fear of inefficiency, fear of competitors catching up in the steel game itself.
So keeping the edge.
Exactly. How do you stay number one when everyone's trying to do what you do?
How did these operational fears manifest?
Constant pressure on his managers. Costs, volume, output, relentless measurement, and demands.
Data-driven before it was a buzzword.
Absolutely. A deep fear of using outdated processes. He wasn't afraid to scrap perfectly good equipment if something better came along. Constant upgrades.
Expensive, but necessary for him.
And watching competitors like a hawk. Any sign they were gaining an edge, like with the Duquesne mill, he reacted fast and decisively.
So these fears translated into benefits.
Mastery of cost accounting. His systems were revolutionary for the time. It led to that famous line, watch the costs and the profits take care of themselves.
Focus on the inputs.
Driving technological innovation. He didn't just adopt the Bessemer process.
Yeah.
He perfected its implementation for maximum efficiency.
Pushing the envelope.
And fostering internal competition. Pitting his own plants, his own managers, against each other to drive performance.
A tough environment. So applications for leaders today.
Develop rigorous tracking. Know your key metrics, not just profit. Understand the levers in your business.
Measure what matters.
Continuously invest in technology and improvement. Don't get complacent. Assume your competitors aren't.
Still paranoid.
In a productive way, yes. And consider how fostering a high-performance culture, maybe even with some internal competition, can drive results. Carefully, though.
What were the main challenges in this empire-building phase?
Direct competitors, obviously. Other steelmakers fighting for the same markets.
Their usual suspects.
The inherent inefficiency of the technology itself, even the Bessemer process, had limits he was always trying to overcome.
Pushing against physics.
And sometimes resistance from workers to new methods or machines. Change isn't always easy to implement.
Human element. And the lessons learned here.
Mastering costs is absolutely vital, maybe even more vital than just chasing revenue.
Control the controllables.
Relentless efficiency provides a massive competitive moat.
Hard to beat.
And understanding and leveraging technology shifts isn't optional. It's key to staying on top.
Okay, stage 5 brings in Henry Clay Frick, a pivotal partnership.
Very pivotal. And it introduces new fears, primarily around labor relations and, frankly, control. Frick was a different kind of operator.
More aggressive.
Much more aggressive, especially with unions. This created a tension, a new set of anxieties for Carnegie.
What were the signs of these specific fears related to Frick and labor?
Definitely a fear of the growing power of labor unions. They represented a direct challenge to management control and profitability.
A threat to the bottom line.
Worry about his public image. Carnegie liked to portray himself as pro-labor, at least in his writings. Frick's hardline tactics clashed with that.
The PR angle.
And probably some fear of conflict with Frick himself. They were both strong personalities, though Frick handled the day-to-day operations more.
Despite the potential friction, what were the benefits of bringing Frick in?
Huge benefits. Frick was a brilliant manager, shared Carnegie's belief in technology, and boosted profits significantly.
Operational alignment.
It allowed Carnegie to delegate the dirty work of labor negotiations. Frick took the heat.
Strategic distancing?
You could say that.
Yeah.
And crucially, the partnership secured a massive, reliable supply of coke from Frick's companies. That's vertical integration controlling your inputs. Very smart.
Key takeaways for listeners thinking about partnerships.
Find partners with complementary strengths, even if their styles differ. That can be powerful.
Yin and yang.
Delegate strategically, especially the tasks you're not suited for or that carry risks. But stay informed.
Don't abdicate responsibility.
Right. And understand the power of vertical integration controlling your supply chain can be a huge advantage.
What were the main challenges or adversaries during the Frick era, pre-Homestead?
The unions, absolutely. The Amalgamated Association was strong and organized.
A real counterforce.
Competition from other coke producers, though Frick largely dominated that.
Supply chain rivals.
And that internal conflict, the gap between Carnegie's public statements and the actual practices under Frick, that was a constant vulnerability.
Lessons from this partnership phase.
Strategic alliances need careful management, especially with strong personalities involved.
Handle with care.
Delegation is powerful, but accountability ultimately stays at the top.
The buck stops here.
And yeah, hypocrisy catches up with you. The gap between image and reality creates problems.
Which leads us directly into stage 6, the Homestead Strike of 1892. A defining dark chapter.
Extremely dark. This is where Carnegie's fears about losing control to the Union collided head-on with reality, resulting in violence and a massive blow to his reputation.
What were the signs of his fear around Homestead?
His physical absence is a big one. Going to Scotland being inaccessible while Frick handled the lockout and brought in the Pinkertons. That looks like avoidance.
Plausible deniability.
Many saw it that way. His private instructions to Frick were chillingly clear. Break the Union. Let grass grow over works, if necessary. That shows deep fear of the Union's power.
No compromise there.
And accounts show he was genuinely shaken by the violence and the backlash. The damage to his name, his legacy, that fear became very real.
Despite the awful human cost and PR disaster, did Carnegie see any benefits from crushing the Homestead Union?
From a cold, hard business perspective,
Yeah.
Yes. The Union was broken, not just at Homestead, but its power was diminished elsewhere too.
Set an example.
It gave the company much tighter control over wages and work rules for years, lower labor costs.
Increased profitability.
And arguably, it cleared the way for even faster technological adoption, replacing skilled, unionized workers with machines, reducing that dependency.
Grim calculus. What are the applications for leaders facing really tough situations, maybe ethical crises?
Understand the human cost. Aggressive tactics have real-world consequences for people's lives.
Beyond the balance sheet.
Realize that your actions in a crisis define you. That's what people remember. Your legacy gets forged in those moments.
Trial by fire.
And be prepared for intense scrutiny. When decisions have major social impact, the world watches.
Who were the key adversaries or challenges during Homestead?
Obviously, the Amalgamated Association and the striking workers themselves, they fought hard.
The direct conflict.
Public opinion turned sharply against him. The press was largely critical. That was a huge challenge.
The court of public opinion.
And his own internal conflict. The gulf between the Gospel of Wealth writer and the reality of Pinkertons and violence, that cognitive dissonance must have been immense.
The enduring lessons from Homestead.
Reputation is fragile. It can be shattered by actions seen as unethical or cruel.
Hard to rebuild trust.
Ignoring or mishandling labor relations has severe lasting consequences. You can't just wish it away.
It demands careful attention.
And finally, any major gap between your stated values and your actions will be exposed. It always comes out.
Okay, final stage. Section 7. Selling the Empire and the Gospel of Wealth.
Right. Now, having built this colossal enterprise, a new fear seems to emerge.
Which is?
The fear of dying disgraced by immense wealth, and maybe the fear of his own legacy being solely defined by ruthless capitalism, especially after Homestead.
So a desire to reshape the narrative.
Exactly. And to unburden himself, perhaps. This seems to drive the sale to J.P. Morgan and his massive shift into philanthropy.
What are the signs of these later life fears?
That famous quote is the most direct sign. The man who dies thus rich dies disgraced. That's a powerful statement of intent or fear.
Can't be much clearer.
Sources talk about his internal conflict, even eternal torment over the wealth and how it was made. He sought reconciliation.
A moral reckoning.
And his lifelong pursuit of knowledge, writing the Gospel of Wealth, it's an attempt to create an ethical framework for having and distributing such vast riches.
Justifying it, but also guiding its use. What benefits came from acting on these fears?
Well, it enabled the biggest business deal in history at the time, selling Carnegie Steel to form U.S. Steel. A huge financial success, paradoxically driven by non-financial fears.
An exit strategy unlike any other.
It freed him up entirely for philanthropy. He gave away over $350 million, an astronomical sum then, funding libraries, education, peace initiatives.
Building a different kind of legacy.
Absolutely. It cemented his image as a great benefactor, which is largely how he's remembered today, despite the complexities.
So, for listeners thinking long-term, what are the applications?
Plan your exit or succession. Don't wait until it's too late. Think about the end game.
Have a strategy beyond growth.
Consider the impact and responsibility that comes with success, financial or otherwise. What will you do with it?
Beyond personal gain.
And think about legacy. What do you want to be remembered for, beyond your job title or bank balance?
What challenges did he face even in this philanthropic phase?
He was now playing in a field with giants like J.P. Morgan, who had different ideas about finance and power.
New competitors, different game.
The sheer challenge of giving away that much money effectively. How do you ensure it does real good? The Gospel of Wealth tried to address that. It's harder than it looks.
The burden of choice.
And still grappling with his past. The shadow of Homestead, the ruthlessness that history didn't just disappear because he started writing checks.
Can't erase the past. So, the final lessons from this last chapter and his whole life.
Financial success doesn't end fear. It just changes his nature. New anxieties emerge.
Wealth doesn't equal peace of mind.
Planning how to use wealth, how to give it back, can be a way to address those later life fears and shape your legacy proactively.
Purpose beyond profit.
And maybe true success, lasting success, involves finding a way to reconcile your achievements with your values and your impact on the wider world.
A fascinating journey. Andrew Carnegie's life, seen through his fears, it becomes less a simple rags to riches story and more human, more complex.
Absolutely. Those anxieties, poverty, failure, inefficiency, losing control, a tarnished legacy, they were the catalysts. They drove the innovation, the ruthlessness, the philanthropy. They shaped him and American history.
Which brings us to the final thought for you, listening. Take a moment to consider your own fears. What are they? And how might they, consciously or unconsciously, be steering your choices, your career, your impact?
Building on Carnegie's complex legacy, could you perhaps channel those anxieties, not just for personal gain, but towards something more meaningful, more lasting?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Welcome to the deep dive. We know you're busy, so we get right into it, pulling out the key insights from some really fascinating sources.
Yeah, think of it as your shortcut to being, well, properly informed.
Today we're tackling a giant, Andrew Carnegie, but we're looking at him through a bit of a different lens.
His fears. It sounds counterintuitive, maybe, but we're exploring how his anxieties actually fueled his incredible success story.
We've mapped it across, what, 7 stages of his life?
That's right. 7 key phases where you can really see these fears cropping up and pushing him to act in specific ways. It wasn't just background noise for him.
Okay, let's dive in. Stage 1, back in Dunfermline, Scotland. The sources really paint a picture of his childhood.
They do. You have the Industrial Revolution basically disrupting everything, especially for his father, who was a handloom weaver.
That trade was becoming obsolete, right?
Exactly. And the economic hardship was very real.
Mm.
We see 3 sort of key signs of how this affected young Andrew.
Okay.
First, his mother's constant stress about money, just the day-to-day worry.
You can imagine.
Second, Carnegie himself talked about these dreadful days, his own early understanding of what poverty felt like.
A visceral thing, not just abstract.
Right. And third, maybe the most impactful, was seeing his father after they came to America. He described him as feeling like a broken man because his skills were no longer valued. That failure hit hard.
Wow, that's a heavy burden for a kid. But these fears didn't paralyze him. They actually created some benefits.
Paradoxically, yes. 3 main things emerged from that hardship.